we're not random. We're not created accidentally. Like God created us intentionally. And so if you root yourself in knowing that God created us in a unique and a loved way, then our worth is already steadfastly there. And that's tough because the world tells us otherwise all the time.
Well, welcome to the Found Podcast. I'm LoriesHart, and I'm so glad that you've joined us today. You are not going to be disappointed. I'm telling you, we have got a guest in the house today that has been not only a friend, but actually I would say a mentor, a coach, a counselor, someone that I call when I'm, hitting rock bottom, and also when I'm on the top of the mountain, because Dr. Mary Lynn, she is truly journeyed with me. She knows Lorie. She knows me inside and out, the ups and downs, and she still likes me. And that's what I love about Mary. She is an amazing person. She's a clinical psychologist. Don't be afraid of that. She keeps it really real. She's executive director of Dr. Lynn and Associates. She's a podcaster on the Fully Lived Life, which happens to be one of my favorite podcasts. She is a wise counselor, and I'm so fortunate to call her friend. I've learned so much from her, and she has released a new book called Rebecoming. We're going to dive into this book today. The theme of Rebecoming is really captured in the tagline. It says, coming out of hiding to live as your God-given essential self. Today, we're going to talk about all things identity and discovering our true identity in Him by finding and discovering, or maybe rediscovering, our essential self. Welcome to the Found Podcast, Mary. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Lorie. I always love hanging out with you, especially when I get to spill your secrets.
Oh no, that's what today's about.
I know. You might have to be, the person on the couch again.
I'm willing to be the person on the couch, Mary. I mean, you know me. I love to keep it real, and so do you.
Yes, I so do.
Thank you for just who you are, for the beautiful friendship we've had over the years. And I thank you for writing this book, Rebecoming. I know that there's a longer story behind why you wrote it, why you didn't want to write it. But I'm telling you, friend, it's a gift to the world, and it's got long legs. This book is going to last for years and years and years, because the truth that you're unpacking is just so relevant to every single human being. Before we jump in, Mary, why did you write this book? Even though I know there were times you didn't want to.
I know it was very painful for you to write it, but why did you write this book? Oh gosh, thank you so much for saying that. You think it's going to have legs, because it's an encouragement for the work that, anybody writes and puts into a book, as you know. And right away, the fear is anyone going to even find any benefit from it? And really, the reluctance to write it wasn't so much writing this book that was reluctance. It was more just writing. And part of it was just because I had written a book 10 years ago, and it was called The Fully Lived Life as well. I just didn't know that I had anything else to say, but I felt this pressure, like somehow I'm not going to be a one book wonder. I have to write something. And so I had an idea of what I was going to write, and it was kind of coming from Dr. Mary, the expert. And it just was not flowing. It was super difficult to sit down and get anything out on paper. I got a few things sketched down, but that's it. And then I got busy with life, and I went through some really great seasons, but also really, to be honest, one of the most difficult seasons in my life from a personal, professional ministry standpoint, where I really questioned my calling, and I questioned my voice. I questioned all sorts of things. I mean, the Lord was just digging deep on my insecurities, and they were coming up to the forefront. I was getting triggered left, right, and center and all these things. And I had to get past blaming others in the situation and kind of go, what's going on in me? So when I started to do that, and I started to recognize how much I work so hard to gain people's love and approval through my performance, through what I can achieve, all the sort of external things. And I was exhausted from doing that. That's when it hit me that I got to start practicing what I preach. And I talk a lot about inner change and all of that, but I thought I was doing it, but not really, because obviously I was still operating out of a lot of this, what I call the shadow self. So when I got to that place of recognizing how much I needed to strip away to really kind of be my true authentic self, if I can call it that, that's when this book emerged. And I wrote it very quickly because it was just so much coming from the place of lived experience, not just for myself, but for the clients that I work with, and just kind of saying, this is something that I think people need to hear if they are at all interested in freedom, personal growth, discovering who they really are, their purpose in life, all those things that are really important. But because I'm a psychologist and I know I'm also a person of faith, I thought I'm going to integrate psychology, science, and faith and just try to bring something practical, but also hopefully encouraging. So that was kind of the motivation to writing the book.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Mary, because as you know, in my book, when I talk about identity, there's some deep crossover themes in our book, both of our books. And one of the real lived experience of both of us is finding our value and worth in performing.
Yes.
And achieving. And actually, we can call it lots of things, like you call it the shadow self. I call it an identity crisis, like we are finding our identity, which is essentially our value and worth. Do I have value? Do I have worth? How do I see myself? And I share my story candidly in my book, as you share very candidly in your book, your journey of unbecoming, and me of learning that this is not my true identity, to actually have to perform and get approval from others. So it is one of those factors, one of those things that holds us back from finding our essential self, as you say. Yeah. I want to ask you this question as we get started here, from a psychologist with over 30 years of experience, as I know. What does the word identity mean to you from a psychologist's perspective?
Oh, gosh. A lot of layers. But it is really our true sense of who we think we are. Being authentic in that, being consistent in that. And it doesn't mean that we aren't going to change, because we are complex beings. It doesn't mean that we might not have different opinions, but it is our core values, our sense of why we do what we do, what our purpose is. And from a psychological standpoint, it also includes like our family history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the choices we make out of that. So what do we want to keep out of the great things that was passed on through us generationally, and what do we not want to keep? And there is some choice. There is quite a lot of choice in that. And it is also just the steps that we take to become sort of that pure, healthier, best version of ourselves. So that's probably a bit more secularized type of way of talking about identity. Other psychologists will call it different things, but that's kind of how I would say it.
That's really helpful. I like to keep things simple as I'm listening to my brilliant friend. And when you think about identify, okay, if you identify yourself, how do you, hi, my name's Lorie, and how would I identify myself, right?
Yeah.
I'm a mom. I start listing all the roles that I play.
Exactly.
I start listing the relationships that I'm in. I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. Oh, and these are the things I do. So they're like, this is my identity. We often identify or define ourselves by the things we do, by the relationships that we're in. Right. And some of these can be very helpful and some of these are not helpful, right? And it doesn't necessarily get to the core of who God made us to be.
Right.
And this is what I
Yeah.
love about your book, Mary. You start in your book and you say that Rebecoming is based on the understanding that each of us is a soul with an essential personal identity rooted in how we reflect the essence of God as his image bearers. Why is it so important to start right there when we have a conversation about identity, that we at the core are image bearers of God?
Well, I think number one, we're not random. We're not created accidentally. Like, for those of us who have stories where we weren't meant to be born as, and we weren't planned pregnancies, for those of us who've had really difficult backgrounds where we didn't feel wanted, like this is not true. Like God created us intentionally and with great love and great purpose. And so each of us were created not only with our own identity, but especially the way in which we reflect God. I mean, God is just like beyond mysterious. And I think his creativity was just so immense that it just kind of had to spill out of heaven. He was like, it spills out of heaven in the flowers and the trees, but whoa, the humans, now I can really show who I am. And so we get to reflect some tiny aspect of his glory in our own unique me way, if I can put it that way. And so it's just so vital that we understand that. And it is rooted in a sense of our belonging, because ultimately all of us just long to belong. We long to be loved. And so if you root yourself in knowing that God created us in a unique and a loved way, then our worth is already steadfastly there. And that's tough because the world tells us otherwise all the time.
And all these things in our life that we allow to define us, whether what the world says, what others have said about us, right? Those words,
Oh,
our
gosh,
family
yes.
experience. You unpack in the book the factors that can often define you. And yet we both come back to this profound truth that we essentially are image bearers, made in the image of God, made to reflect God in the world. I've been thinking about the power of this, Mary, and having conversations with different people in my life, those from different faiths and different cultures. And you and I have both traveled a fair bit and served on mission work in different cultures. It is a profound truth, isn't it, that we have value. Every human being has intrinsic value and worth because we are created by a God who made us in his image. It's a very profound truth. And you look through culture at religions or caste systems in many cultures where there are those that have value and worth, and then there are others that don't. If you go back to before Christ, there was not this understanding that everyone had value and worth. There were certain people that did, and then the rest were to be discarded. This is such a profound truth that if we don't get this, we kind of lose who God is, don't we?
Well, exactly. And we lose that, how Jesus came to actually walk with the marginalized and those who were rejects of society. And he lifted them up and he loved them and he showed them their worth. And that's what transformed them, right? It wasn't just the fact that, the teacher was walking with them. It's because he loved them. And I think that, to your book and to the theme of my book, just this sense that we know that we are loved and we are created in his image. We're image bearers. But the thing that I love is that we're also uniquely us. Like there is no two yous in this world. There's no two me's in this world. So we get to reflect him in different ways. And we actually have a lot of autonomy in that, how it is, because back to psychology with personality, yes, we're given certain temperaments. And we will, grow, if we're going to stay authentic to ourselves, out of the core of our temperament. But in that, there's so many choices of decisions we make and how we're going to respond and what traits we're going to develop and where we're going to develop in our character and all of that, right? But there's still this core sense of, knowing who we are and knowing our worth. So that's really key. But the problem is, I was talking to some parents of this young kid, and this young child clearly struggles with a lot of self-esteem issues. And she would say, my friends hate me, I'm terrible, like really painful things to hear from a child. But I was saying to the parents, kids, they have experiences at school, at our home, and they make all sorts of conclusions about themselves. And the challenge is, they believe those conclusions to be true. And if it never gets tested by reality, they will grow up continuing to believe those things, and they will live out of those things, and they will kind of create this narrative and even experiences that come out of that false belief about themselves. So that's why the undoing or unbecoming all the things that we thought we had to be loved by others isn't just my performance and my perfectionism and all of those things that my great strategies that I use, but it's also just the false narratives and the things I believed about myself based on pain I've experienced or insecurities I have, right?
Oh, that's so good, Mary. I just love how you unpack that in your book about how each one of us are uniquely a reflection of God. And honestly, if we don't each uniquely come out, show up in the world as our authentic self in every way that God has created us to be in our uniqueness, there's a lot at stake. Like we miss out. And then, as you said, in that young child's experience, in our own child experiences, we can all relate to this, where we weren't able to show up in the world in the way that God had created us to be because we had allowed words or experiences to define us that actually aren't our true selves. What's at stake when we don't actually show up as the person that God called us to be? And we're not talking just about kids, right, Mary? We're talking about people, let's say our age, you get old in your life and you're still not showing up. You still don't, you're missing out, right, on who God made you to be.
Yeah, I mean, for ourselves personally, our capacity to live life with joy. And when I say joy, I don't mean happiness in the traditional sense, because life has hard times and moments. We have suffering that none of us are immune to, but we can have joy in the midst of that because we have certainty that we are loved and that we are valued and that there is a purpose that we play in this world. Intentionality in the choices we make, in the values that we have. I mean, all those things shape how we show up in this world, so that actually, when we are living as our God-given essential self, we feel more free, we feel more joy, we feel more just alive. So that's from a personal level. But because we're created to reflect the glory of God, we are created to show love in this world. We are created to impact this world in some me-shaped way that somehow will make this world better. If I'm not showing up as my essential self, then there's some aspect of this world that does not get to benefit from that. And to our listeners, like, they look at us and they go, oh, well, you guys speak, you write books, obviously you have all this stuff that you can impact. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about those quiet moments when you show up, with food for a sick neighbor, or you sit next to somebody who's really struggling, or whatever it is that you do, and you're showing love to this world. You're showing just how much worth that person has. Like, that is so significant. And you don't know the ripple effect of that person gaining some healing, some sense of love and belonging that brings them to a place where they can then pass it on to other people. It's profound. And we're talking generationally because it affects, like, the changes you do for yourself, Lorie, and your personal growth affects your future generations. Absolutely. There's some science around that too, actually, but I won't go into that at this point.
Well, you know what? I think that is so powerful. And I think that's the truth of it, that if we actually at the core of ourselves really, and I'm sitting on this point for a reason, Mary, because I think if you don't truly understand that you are made uniquely designed and created and loved, and God has given you really everything you need to shine in this world, then you won't actually step into that. And then everyone is robbed of
Yeah.
what God wanted to do and give through you, right?
Right.
You're
Yeah.
robbed, others are robbed. Tell us more about this generational impact, because for me, I think that's one of the motivational, a real key motivation in wanting to do the work, in wanting to actually have growth in our life, whether it's spiritual, relational, emotional growth. It's because as you get older, you realize that who you are is impacting your kids and their kids. And tell us more about the impact of that generationally.
Yeah, well, on a personal level, I mean, I have a lot of people coming to me and they're like, oh, so and so won't change and so won't change. And it's like, well, that's okay. You can change, you can grow. And I have seen time and time again, when you change, you are already changing the dynamics within your family system, your friends group, and your community. So just by virtue of you working on your personal transformation, you are already impacting others. And you also get to model. I mean, one of the things I love that my kids say to me all the time is how much they appreciate my growth mindset, which is, the thing I was preaching as a psychologist, growth mindset, every time I wanted them to do something hard. And they turn it around on me and have made me learn how to do video games and things like that. And it's hard. And every time I'm complaining, they're like, growth mindset, mom. And so it's funny. But like one of the greatest gifts that they say to me is that, mom, we love that you are constantly growing. And so I hope it inspires them to do the same thing. Yes. But on a science level, actually, it's been shown. Now, it's too late for you to have kids, but for those parents
I've already had my kids.
Yeah, it's too late. But I can actually, as I change, the DNA that I pass on to my kids, I'm talking to younger people, actually gets changed by your change. And it's pretty remarkable science that actually happens, so that your change does affect future generations. Now, in your case, it's going to be more just how you love your grandkids and how you model that and how you impact them as you change. But the changes that they undergo will then impact future generations, because the DNA actually gets passed down because it gets changed. It's remarkable.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Mary. And of course, we know as followers of Jesus, I know in my family story, my parents were like first generation Christians. And I mean, there was good in their families, but there was also some pretty dysfunctional, funky stuff too.
Yeah.
And I can honestly see, in especially my mom's family, that there's alcohol. Her dad was an alcoholic. There was a very tumultuous home she was raised in. And she came to know the Lord. And just by the transformation that took place in my mom's life truly has changed a generation, and my father too, that it changed their family, which is now changed up to 25 great grandchildren they have.
Wow.
And you can see the transformation. But if nothing had changed, I'm telling you, we would all be a hot mess. We probably are still a bit of a hot mess, but we have Jesus. And honestly, no, in all seriousness, the generations are changed.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, everybody has a personal responsibility for their own lives. We're not playing victim here. And I'm not saying that harshly, as in, I know some people go through unbelievable trauma, but I also know people who go through in extreme trauma and raise above it and triumph and grow stronger as a result. And it is by choice. It doesn't ignore the fact that in our humanity, there will be brokenness in our life. And sometimes this side of heaven, it will never be fully healed. And we just learn to be resilient in the reality of that. And, this question I say to people sometimes is like, if you were a quadriplegic, bedridden, and you were no longer able to do anything, would you still have value? Because then that strips away all the roles, all the things that people do, and it makes them really sit in that place of, do I really have value? Right? So I think that's important to strip it past all of the things that we think we need to do. And it quiets people. There is this story that I read of a young nun, and she got tuberculosis. So she was going to die she did die at the age of 24. And she says, I know I cannot do anything big because I know I'm dying. And she says, but what I can do is I can give away flowers and I can spread love. And that's what she did. And they were in small little ways that she could do within the limitations of her physical health issues and the fact that she was becoming weaker and weaker. So there's no reason why, no matter how long or short, how many challenges we have in our life, there's no reason why each one of us cannot show up in our true God-given essential self and make some impact in some way in this world.
That is so good, Mary. I mean, I share, as you know, 9 different stories in my book, and a lot of the stories are stories of people who lost the thing that used to define them. They lost, in some cases, their health. I share about losing my voice. I share about, leaving jobs, things that had defined me, and then discovering I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
I can actually, God then grew me through those things that were taken out of my life for various reasons, to actually have me discover that I'm not all defined by that job, or I'm not all defined by, that fact that I used to music and singing were a core essential identity marker in my life, went to university to get a degree in it and lost my voice. And I was like, now who am I? And I think that is a key when you lose things in your life that have defined you. Maybe it's the money, maybe it's the marriage, maybe it's the friendships, maybe it is your health. Then who are you?
I was just going to say, it's a very scary place to be when those previous identity markers are taken away from your life. And absolutely, you have to grieve it because it's a loss. And part of the grieving allows us to remember how compassionate God is in our pain and that Jesus understands suffering. So we don't have to shortcut it and go, oh, well, Jesus knows what he's doing and he's in control, and we poo-pah our pain, because he never did. He never did. And so to let yourself grieve it then opens you up to the possibilities of the freedom that he is giving you to then find something else, or the deeper thing that actually maybe you weren't able to see or experience when you were so focused on your identity as a singer.
The deeper thing. That's it. The deeper thing. Because at the end of the day, you've lost your parents, and my parents are aging, and we're in a journey of, that it's difficult near the end of people's lives. You see all these things stripped away, and it's like, who are you really? And the deeper thing is those character things, those things that have been held deep inside you. Where have you put your hope and your trust? I love in your book how you help us do this, Mary. I feel like your book, and it takes people on a journey to really unbecome, to recognize the things that are holding them back from becoming all that God wants them to be and has created them to be. It's not for the faint of heart. As I told you, I've read it twice now, and because we've done a few interviews on this on the TV show The Perspective, if people want to check that out. We did a whole week on it. But I love the journey, Mary, that you helped me and continue to help me. Now I find myself going to certain chapters and going, I think that thing I need to pay attention to. And you talk a lot about self-awareness.
Oh,
and
gosh, yes.
Unpack what's really going on in there, Lorie, right? And this is such a critical thing. Talk to us about self-awareness and how the lack of it will hinder us, but the freedom there is in it to discover the good, bad, and ugly about yourself.
Yes. Well, self-awareness is this beautiful aspect of it where you're discovering your inner voice, your emotions, your longings, your desires, your dreams, your values. It's very self-reflective, and it allows you to kind of sense things that really speak to you, that are important to you, that knowing that can make a huge difference. And that's sort of the deeper level of self-knowledge. But like on the day-to-day basis, when I'm upset or when I'm triggered, if I'm not paying attention to my emotions, they're hijacking me. So I'm likely to say or do things that are probably not helpful to the situation. And then I feel shame, I feel worse, and then whatever it might be. So just being self-aware of how we're feeling and what we're thinking and what our narratives are as we're interacting in a given situation can help us do better. I mean, that's the thing, is we are created to survive, and our survival instincts are extremely strong. And nowadays, it's not so much surviving against the tiger that's coming against us. It's more surviving against attacks against our integrity or our reputation or our loss of respect of other people. It's more like that, or how many followers we have on social media. And so it's just being able to recognize when I get triggered, how I respond. So that's the inner self-awareness that I think is really, really important. But the second aspect of inner or self-awareness is how other people experience me. Like, what's it like being on the other side of me? So I may think, I was just at our small group. Hopefully they're not going to listen and be offended. But I don't mean it offensively. But one of the fellows asks for prayer, and he just wants prayer. Well, for the next 15 minutes, everyone's giving him advice. And I'm like, what's it like feeling for, and I'm watching him, and he literally just wants prayer. And he's being very gracious. He accepts it and all that. But you think you're helping somebody by giving them advice when all he wants is to be held in prayer. And I think about myself, how often I give unwanted advice. It is so brutal. Ask my family, they could tell you that. How many times I'm learning to bite my tongue, but so many times I just step over the line and I tell people what to do. And it comes out of like really, I hope, loving motives. And also, to be honest, fear. I fear that they're going to make the wrong decision. But on the other side of me, it doesn't feel good. It can feel critical. It can feel like I don't believe in them, all sorts of things. So like, even if we have good intentions and we're not aware of how other people are experiencing us, then it's not having the impact that we really actually want. So that's kind of what I mean by self-awareness and how important it is. I mean, it's huge. It impacts all of our relationships. One of the things I see that in leaders is that they have a certain vision, they have certain gifts and abilities, they have intentions about how they want to lead, but because they lack self-awareness, they don't realize that if you look behind them, I won't call them dead bodies, but it feels like it sometimes, a whole rack of, bodies piling up. And that is not because the person is wanting to harm anyone, but it's a lack of self-awareness.
Hey friends, thanks so much for joining me on this journey of Found. Now the podcast, it's an extension, of course, of the book Found. There's a video series. This message of identity and purpose, I just want to share it so that we all know not only who we are, but what God has called us to. And I hope that you're finding it encouraging today. Would you do me a favor? We'd love for more people to be on this journey of Found. Subscribe on the podcast or the YouTube channel, Lorie Hartshorn. You can find me at Lorie Hartshorn in all places, social media as well. How about make a comment? I'd love to hear from you. Send me your thoughts, your questions. We'll continue the conversation together. But thanks for joining me on this journey of Found, and please share it with others. Now back to the conversation. I love that so much. I mean, where do I begin, Mary? How many things do you want me to tell about myself here?
I know, right?
Like when you were talking about, you meaning well, having good intention, wanting to give people advice, and then feeling on the other side of that, it's like, but that's not really that. And you meant well, but it actually is hurting other people in that moment.
Exactly.
Unless, of course, they are seeking your advice. So for me, I would say a big area of my personal growth in this area of self-awareness is I love to fix things. I'm a problem solver.
I gotcha. Yes.
I love to problem solve. And I'm like, let me help you solve that problem in your life,
Right.
And first, and So in one way, that's good. And if people want me to help them problem solve, it's probably a strength. But often people are not asking me to problem solve. They just simply want, as you said, your friend. Maybe it's just prayer. Maybe they just want me to be present with them. Maybe they just want me to listen. But it's taken me a while in my life, years, in fact, to learn to, shut up and listen and not have to have the answer. But I realized where that was coming from. And you have been a person that's helped me with this. And I still can get triggered. Then I'm like, in some ways, and you can I'm on the couch now, so you go ahead and analyze me. But when I go into problem solving mode and I want to fix things, especially out of fear. So like in our family, if I see my kids doing things, I'm like, no, like, don't be doing that. I think I'm helping them by wanting to fix it or solve the problem for them. But what I learned, and I'm still learning, that disempowers them. That actually I'm in some way saying, you can't fix this on your own. I'm going to fix it for you because I have a hero complex. Like I have a need there's some need inside of me.
It's called
that
overfunctioning.
Needs to get in there and rescue. Which chapter?
Overfunctioning.
Overfunctioning, right? I've read it about 20 times. And I can relate to that. The
chapter.
Overfunctioning. I'm taking on extra responsibility that actually is theirs, not mine.
Right.
And I'm really trying to unlearn that, Mary. I'm trying to unbecome in that area.
Yes. And I would say too, as a parent of adult kids, for me, as you mentioned, the huge aspect of what drives me is fear. I'm afraid that they'll make the wrong decision. I'm afraid that they're going to experience pain. I'm afraid of too many things. And one of the things that I have found really helpful is to kind of say to myself, okay, I am not going to give advice unless they actually ask me for it. I want to be a safe place. I want to be a place where they can share anything with me and I will just be empathetic. And even if I don't agree with what they're deciding, or even if I don't understand it, the conversation is going to be more around empathy and understanding. And so I have actually said to my kids, if I cross the line, I say to them, I commit to you. I am going to try really hard not to give you advice. I'm going to try really hard not to be nosy and poke around in your life. I'm going to fail, but I give you full permission that when I do that, please let me know. And I'm going to apologize for it. And I'm going to try to do better next time around. And I have found that actually for both my kids, they've been really gracious in telling me that, Mom, that wasn't really helpful. Or, you know what, Mom, I'll be able to figure it out on my own. Or Mom, when you said that thing to me, that actually was really hurtful. I'm like, whoa. And just to be really humble and receive it and ask for their forgiveness and say, thank you for letting me know. Because that's hard. It's really hard as a child to speak to an adult. I had that same experience with my parents, and to just fear that they might not receive it. And when they bravely tell me where I've stepped across a line, I want to be thankful for them for doing that, for being brave. And I want to do better, because ultimately I want to have a great relationship with my kids. I want to communicate to them that I trust them. I trust their judgment, and I want to see them figure out their own God-given essential self and the path that he has for them. It's not for me. I'm not mini Holy Spirit, even though I like to think I am, telling them how they should live their life. And I see the pathway in front of them, but apparently I don't. So.
You know what? It's so helpful, Mary. And I think, if with a lack of self-awareness, we're hurting others without realizing it, but we're actually robbing ourselves, because underneath a lot of the why we do what we do, which you unpack a lot in your book of why we do what we do, there is some need that we're filling in our life. Yeah. By the way, even the bad ways that we behave. And maybe we're soothing our own fears or taking care of our own shame, or those things. Like, how do you know when you're operating out of an unhealthy place? How do you become aware of that?
Right. Well, I think if you understand the emotions driving, I mean, sort of the three big emotions that can drive a lot of our responses, sort of like the quick reactive emotions that I call hot emotions, like anger, fear, and shame. So when you feel those emotions, if you are paying attention to your body, it's feeling it. So for me, like I feel shame, I get this flush that comes up my body. I feel this pit in my stomach. So knowing that I'm feeling those emotions is sort of like oh, something's going on. I've been triggered. So slowing down to be able to process how I feel and then begin to think, why do I feel that way? And then to give myself space. Because some of us, I'm learning to be more real time tracking with my emotions and how I'm feeling and how I'm triggered. But when I was first starting in this journey, I would have to take a day or two. There's very few conversations that have to be resolved right there and then. My anxiety may want to resolve it, but then it's not going to go in a really good direction. So taking the time to really process what do I feel? Why do I feel this? What's going on for me? What do I need, if anything? And sometimes it's just between you and God and there's no action that has to be taken. But many times, because it involves other people, there's further conversations that you need to take. But it comes out of a thought through, prayed through, healthier place. And it is with a desire to build bridges with the other person, right? And to repair if something has been, has been broken in our conversation, if you sense the tension, right? So I think that is so important for us to be able to do that in all of our relationships, for sure.
Well, humility. I'm just hearing humility, humility, humility. Be teachable, be teachable.
Yeah,
be teachable.
It is.
And you've told me, and I think that's the gift that I always want to be teachable. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to be more self-aware. And you've helped me, and your book really helped me again, get some tools to help me do that. So thinking about, am I afraid? Am I feeling shame? Is there, what is it that's underneath this? And being able to go to the Lord, who is so able to heal that, or to be able to go talk to a counselor or a good friend to say, this is how I'm feeling. Do you see that in me? That is the process of growth, isn't it?
It sure is. It's definitely not something we can do alone.
Yes.
We can be in our own little echo chamber of what we believe, and we think, because feelings can tell us that what we feel is right, and feelings aren't right or wrong. They just are. It's the conclusions we make based on those feelings that can be really suspect, because it depends on our filters, our biases, our unmet needs, our insecurities. So to be able to know that, I think it's just important for our viewers and listeners to know is that growth happens best in the context of safe relationships, because having people who love you and they have your back, but who are also willing to speak truth to you in a loving way. Just even as simple as, "Ooh, ouch, when you said that thing to me, it hurt." Or when you said that thing to me, it was hard to understand. And this is what I took it to mean. And those honest conversations again and again and again helps me to kind of go, okay, that behavior or that action or those words I use, they're being interpreted consistently. Because that's a thing. In all of my situations, I am the common denominator. So I'm getting the same response. Something has to change in me. So having that healthy community is so essential. And we are wired for connection. We are wired for relationships. And so when we have those relationships and we can build intimate communication and connection, then that's where we can gain the fullest healing.
I love that. And I love this quote from your book. You say, when we choose protection over connection, we will kill our soul. Being disconnected from others was not the way we were meant to be ever. And going back to, we're created in the image of God. Part of who God is, significant part of who God is he's three persons. He is community. He operates in community, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He's relational. And we are relational beings. So there is so much at stake when we pull away from others. We don't allow other people to speak in our life. We don't have a place for open learning and vulnerability. That's why I think doing life together and being part of a church is so significant. I was a small group pastor where you were the pastor of care at our church for many years. And we saw that what I learned from you there was care and connection really happens in small groups. And we work together to create safe spaces for people to experience deep connection, not just superficial connection, but deep connection, and teach people the importance of vulnerability. We saw a lot of growth in that, didn't we, Mary?
Absolutely. I think that is so key because, I understand. I mean, when babies are born, they long for connection. They long for care. Their brains are ready for the wiring of connection, for sure. But they don't always get that. And even if you do, you go through life and you have experiences of rejection or judgment or failure, whatever it might be. And so it's so natural to go into self-preservation, and you wear masks and you hide yourself, and you say, when people ask how you're doing, and you say, I am blessed beyond measure. And after a while, that kind of runs a little like, I don't know, because you can't always be that happy. So we are doing it to protect ourselves, and we don't let people in because we're afraid. We're afraid of that experience of hurt and judgment and all those things that we experienced either from early childhood or later in life. But there's no way that we're going to gain healing in those areas of deep hurt if we don't expose ourselves to healthier relationships that teaches us we can trust others, we can grow, and we need others. And we are wired for relationships. So although there are people who choose isolation and aloneness because they do that because that feels safe to them, deep down, if they're really honest with themselves, they long for people to be in relationship with them, to care for them, to love them, and to do this mutually, so that there is this sense of belonging. And I've said this in the book, belonging isn't fitting in, where I do whatever it takes to fit in, follow the rules, wear all sorts of masks to fit in. It is actually, I can be my true self. And some days I'm a little crankier than other days. And I know you still love me. You might not want to be with me when I'm cranky, but I know you still love me. I don't lose that. And I also know that if things mess up, we have the ability to repair. It's so key that we can talk things through, we can resolve it, and we do it out of place of love. So that's the key thing that is so important part of our healing. And I don't say this lightly, especially for people who've experienced so much trauma and they can barely trust anyone, and understand that if you're in that place, you will probably need a therapeutic relationship to experience safety. When you experience safety in a therapeutic relationship, you actually begin to internalize those feelings. You start to recognize what it feels like. Your soul begins to open up to the possibility of it, and your longings become more apparent, and you're just healthier in your judgment of the kinds of people you're going to choose to trust to open up to. So I think it's really important if you're in that place where connections is just so difficult for you.
That's really helpful, Mary, because I think some people are thinking, do I need extra help here? I don't know if I have those healthy people in my life. I don't have maybe that community. And I think going to getting some professional help can help you feel safe again, to be able to identify what would be healthy relationships, healthy attachments. I love in your book how you describe attachments. Would you do that for us? I know it's a big topic and all, but I think it would help people go, oh, maybe that's why I connect or relate to people in the way that I do. Tell us about attachment styles and what's the importance of it? How does it affect us?
I'll start a little backwards. And I'll talk about how people do relationships now, and how they do relationships now, if they haven't done any work in it, is rooted in past attachment patterns. So if you tend to be a person who has a hard time being vulnerable, letting down the walls, I mean, you're friendly and all that kind of stuff, but you're okay with your own company and you're very independent and all of that, you probably have something that's called an avoidant attachment style. So going backwards with that, you were probably raised in an environment where very early on, either your parents were too busy or unable to meet your needs physically and emotionally. And so you learned early on, I'm on my own. I got to figure it out myself. And as you get older, there might even be pride in it. And you lose sight of your need for connection because connection actually feels uncomfortable. And so that can be one of the styles of attachment. Or you, in relationship, you're always wondering, does my friend like me? Are they mad at me? Or in a partner relationship, are they going to ever leave me? Can I really feel secure that they're going to stay with me? And you're always questioning and almost pushing them sometimes or pursuing them. And they say things like, sometimes you just are overwhelming and sometimes your needs seem so much and all of that. Well, that ties back to something called an anxious attachment style, where if you go back into your childhood, you had a parenting, experiences that was sort of hot and cold. You didn't necessarily know. I mean, you had a loving parent, but sometimes they would be moody and you have to walk around eggshells and you don't necessarily know. And you learned early on that you got attention from your parents when you were sick or distressed. And so you learned to live in that place of like, if I'm anxious, I need to find a comfort from them and they will give it to me. But it's not this sort of steadfast, oh, I can trust this person. If you are currently in relationships where you can be honest with others, you can show your true self, you can be vulnerable, you can cry, you can show anger, and you know you are still loved. If you generally are able to gather healthy relationships around you, then you probably had a home upbringing where you had parents who were present emotionally for you. So it's emotionally available. They're emotionally sensitive. So it's not just one size fits all, because you have 3 kids. They all had 3 different needs. But it's sensitive, attentive, and present. Then you have a secure attachment style. And the very last one I will just throw in there, disorganized attachment style, is you love them, you hate them, you love them, you hate them, all over the place. And you almost create drama in your relationships because that's what's familiar. And you have short term and you jump from relationship to relationship. You likely came from an abusive home environment. So the person who was supposed to love you is the one who also hurt you. So it's hard for you to trust that people in your life who are supposed to love you will actually be there for you. And so you do things that can sometimes sabotage those relationships before it gets to that point where it's actually going to hurt you. And that definitely, if that's the type of attachment style you have, that requires therapy in my experience to be able to repair that.
Thanks for unpacking that. I think as I'm listening to you and our viewers and listeners are listening, it probably, you felt that little ooh inside of you and going, oh, I think that is why I relate to the world and relate to others in the way that I do. And you and I both know, and I love your book, it brings so much hope. You unpack these things, you talk about trauma, you talk about the significance and impact of trauma, you don't gloss over things, but you always present a hopeful future. And of course, in my book, Found, by the title itself, it's like you are found. There's so much available to you in Jesus. And both of our heart's desires is that people will know who they are, how God sees them, and everything that's available to them when they actually become more and more like the one they're designed to be, right? So talk to us as we, wrap up here, Mary. What's the hope in finding ourself, and where's your faith? Like, how is your faith in God impacted and really transformed you? And what place does it have in this journey of rebecoming or becoming all God designed us to be?
Well, first of all, I want people to give themselves a lot of grace and self-compassion, because the journey of transformation is lifelong and you will absolutely mess up. It's not a checklist of things to do. So I think for me, the faith component is that I know he loves me. I know that he's compassionate. I know he understands my humanity and my brokenness and my insecurities. He understands all that with great, great compassion. So every time I mess up, I can go to him and I can feel his love and I can get up and I can do it again. But from a transformation as in how I grow through my lifetime, it's the wisdom that Jesus offers me through the words that he says in the scripture, but especially how he lived his life. Like if I can model myself after how he lived his life, the way of love, the way of sacrifice and being a servant, the way of treating people with kindness and goodness and all the fruit of the Spirit. Like if I can model myself after that, that is, my faith becomes a intricate part of how I grow and transform. And ultimately, because I'm a Jesus follower, I truly believe that we are here for a purpose. That we're not just accidents. So my faith gives me hope that not only will he be with me as he transforms me and as I work on because it's, I say he transforms me, but I gotta be honest, it takes a lot of personal work as well. It's like the two of us doing it together. He shows us the way and then we're like, I gotta still do that. But like that ultimately is for a purpose that is for my betterment as I become more free and joyful, but it ultimately is also for the purpose he's called us to. I should say purposes, because we don't have one singular purpose. If you missed it, you messed it up. That's how my faith has been so integral in how my transformation journey has come. And I'll tell you, I'm at a point in my life now, and this hopefully comes with maturity. It comes with having already done a lot of things career-wise, raised a family and all that. And now it's sort of going, I'm older. What purpose do I have still in this life? And to be quieter, not so quick to jump in to rescue or save or to make myself look good because I have to do this thing or that thing, but to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit guiding me on what he's asking me to do in that given situation. And I've learned the quiet and the small is often what he's asking me to do in the day in and day out and how I live my life, not what I do. And that in that trajectory, because I talk in my book about transformation being repeated behaviors again and again. From a science standpoint, you got to keep repeating it for that new neural wiring to happening and for us to really be transformed and it becomes part of our character. And so it's from a faith standpoint, me doing those things that he asks me to do in the small, quiet ways again and again, and how I live my life, how I love others well, how I treat this earth well, how I respond to other people. All of those things is what is transforming me more and more ultimately to be the best version of myself.
So good, Mary. And I know as we've talked about this together, and then at the same time we were writing and we released our books. Well, actually, I took much longer to write my book. It was like years and years.
Well, you did your master's degree on it, so.
That's right. Yeah. It came out of my master's thesis, but it was like, that was 2020 and I didn't get the book out till 2024. But in that process, I think, as you said, really enjoying the relationship we have with the Holy Spirit, knowing that Jesus is not just our Savior, but actually our model. And he shows us what it actually means to be human, and that we're invited into that. We're invited into that relationship, the way Jesus lived on earth. We're actually able to live that way, not because we're actually so great, but if we cooperate with the Holy Spirit, if we participate and continue to let God transform our minds, our thinking, right? If we journey with God with our emotions, if we invite God into our relationships, like there is a supernatural power available to us, to those of us who know Christ. And this is how we find our true self. It's not something we have to suck it up, buttercup, or work harder, or, do the checklist, as you say. It's actually this transformation that is an internal thing, transforming our mind, and we get a new heart as a follower of Jesus, that we actually start desiring to be the person God wants us to be and designed us to be. So I just love how you give us so many tools and insights to understand how we're wired, how God works these things out in our life. And both of us are on a journey. We admit that, and we're continuing to grow in this. So thank you for your example of that. Thank you for your wisdom and your insight today. Any final words of encouragement for our listeners as we sign off today?
Yeah. If you read the book and you kind of go, whoa, I've had a few people reach out to me and say, this is hard stuff. The encouragement is that you can do hard stuff. The encouragement is that not only are you given a God-given essential self, but you're also given, like, as you said, Lorie, the Holy Spirit, but you're also given lots of grace, lots of assistance, lots of patience as you work through the hard stuff. So that's my encouragement. My encouragement is to be patient with yourself, to be compassionate with yourself. And if you're just taking little baby steps forward, kudos, like congratulations. That's amazing. And just remember, it's a lifetime journey of transformation. So just be kind to yourself as you do this work.
Yeah, so good, Mary. Where can people find you these days on social, or how can they connect with you?
Yep. So drmary.com is my website. On Instagram is the main social media platform I use. It's hashtag Dr. Mary Lynn. And I think you'll probably have my links, I'm suspecting. So anyway, and if you Google Dr. Mary C. Lynn and look for the book Rebecoming, it pops up in all sorts of different places to buy it. So I appreciate anyone willing to do that.
Yeah, we're going to put all the links here, and I'm holding up this book saying, get the book. It'll be your cheapest counseling therapy you've ever received in your life. Come on now. And you can do hard things. You can do hard things because you're not alone in it. Circle up with, I know Mary recommends as you read the book, find, 2 or 3 others who will read it with you and do the work together, because that's always an encouraging community to be a part of. But I encourage you to get the book Rebecoming, go on the journey, free yourself up from the things that have hindered you and held you back from being the person God created you to be. Come on now, and start living out of your true identity, because identity and purpose, as Mary's already talked about, they're closely linked together. If you want to know what to do, discover who you are, and then it naturally starts flowing out of you. So thank you, Mary. And it's Merry, Mary.
Yes.
Lynn, Lin. And I'm just hoping that people will get your book. And I thank you, my friend, my mentor, my many years of cheerleading in my life and kicking me in the butt at the same time. How's that?
Yes. Well, thank you also for having me on, and thank you for your years of friendship and your encouragement. I mean, you are my number one cheerleader for sure. So I like to say you're my number one fan. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Check out that Fully Lived Life podcast. Thanks for joining us today. It's been such a gift. Thanks for joining us on the Found podcast. And I hope you know that you are found, and everything that you're looking for is found in Jesus. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Found podcast. I hope you're feeling encouraged and excited to step into everything God has for you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And if today's show encouraged you, please share it with friends and give us a shout out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.